All right. So welcome everybody to this what's going to be a discussion about the Nova framework. I'm Jesse Gum. I'm the project man or the project leader for the Nitrogen Web framework. But we're here to talk about the Nova framework by Daniel Widgren and Niclas Axelsson. They're going to be just kind of giving us a walkthrough, presentation, demonstration, all the way up through from the basics up to how to build a real-time application with it. Along the way, if you have any questions you want for the Q&A section, make sure you drop those into the Q&A tab in the Whova app. Other than that, I'm going to pass it off to Daniel and Niclas. So you guys feel free to take it away.
Yes, welcome to our talk about Nova. It is a new framework that we have built. That we kind of felt was a missing part in the Erlang community after Chicago Boss and others. So we will try to do a nice presentation and hope that you would try it out. So what is Nova? Nova is a model view controller. It has parts like views that we use the Django template language for, using early detailed. We also have a model part using LDB. I think Niclas will mention some of that later. And we have plugins that kind of is a pipeline for your requests. So if you want to decode your object and so on during the way a request reach your before business logic, it can handle that. We also have like session handling, and everything of this is built on top of Cowboy. Cowboy is a really tested and good web server, and a lot of application is using it, and we felt it was a good step to build on it. And one of the things that me and Niclas stepped on over a lot of years of using it is that it's kind of a lot of boilerplates that you need to do to get started with Cowboy. So what Nova can do is like handle it for you. So one of the things that we wanted also with Nova is that you should have like a high productivity and high performance. So we have built it on the Beam and Erlang, both because me and Niclas has been Erlang developers for over 10 years, and we really like the language and the virtual machine. And during these years, we both have built application that are scaled, and we have seen that the Beam and the VM and everything, it kind of scales. And when things crash, it's really is with the isolated processes that it doesn't bring down all the application. You can let one request crash and the rest of the API still works. And this is what I think is really beautiful with the Erlang and the Beam, is that you can isolate some part of the application, and from that, the other things could still work. And also, we have kind of kept things really close to the OTP and Erlang. And because of this, we have seen that also it is possible to use Nova for other Beam languages. One of the things that we have started to test is to go with LFE, the like Lisp flavored Erlang, and tested it. So it is possible to use Nova for other Beam languages. So when you kind of download and use Nova, I will show later how you can install and get started. But Nova also contains built-in tools, like it has a JSON library, it has a HTTP client that you can use, and we also have an UUID lib. And these kind of things make it that if you're building a REST API handling JSON objects, you don't really need to add a lot of dependencies to get starting. You can download Nova, create your API, and get started. and that is kind of what we wanted to focus on also with Nova, is that it should be really easy to get started, build your logic, and release. A lot of these kind of tools come from a library called GHN Sonolib that has a lot of clients and protocols and other things that you can look at if you want. So with the stack, when you build a application, you have your application on top. Below that, it's kind of Nova that has a lot of logic handling Kobe handlers and other things that Kobe does. And below Nova, you have a Cowboy, and Kobe is run on Beam. So this is kind of the stack that we have today. So plugins that I mentioned before is a way for us to handle all your requests, and before you reach your business logic, you might, as I say, if it's you use application JSON, you maybe want to decode it, and so when you come to your controller kind of logic, then you know that the data is already decoded to, say, a map, and you can use it. And when you return it back to, say, a post request before that, you can kind of encode it again to a JSON. And in this way, you can also have things like access logs and see how much time it took from you got the request until you kind of return the request. So you can do quite a lot with the pre and post requests, and these kind of works both for HTTP and WebSocket. And everything in Nova takes the Cowboy request. Cowboy request has quite a lot of information in the request. And what we do in Nova is kind of, we use this kind of request map, and we add information to the request, or like adding a response code or response headers, or if you use a pre or post request, you could add like correlation IDs and that kind of things that you want to track how things goes in your application. So yes, Niclas.
All right. Yeah, I will just take over this share here and see if we can make a new one. There we go. All right, so thank you, Daniel. As Daniel has already mentioned, Nova is quite a full web framework by now. And one of the key ideas we had with Nova from the beginning was that it should be very, very easy to get started with. And one of the things that I tend, at least, to be a little bit confused about when starting using Cowboy, for example, is how is the routing set up and to have that in a logic place. So in Nova, we have just released from yesterday, we released a new version, which is using our new sort of routing algorithm. So basically what we're doing, we build a radix tree or a radix tree-ish implementation. This can actually detect non-deterministic routes, for example. So it has some interesting properties in it. It uses the persistent term storage to actually store the lookup tree. This makes it really fast for doing handling incoming requests and to route them to the correct thing. And also this new module, it totally replaces the one in Cowboy for good and for bad. It's fairly new, so it certainly contains a lot of bugs, but from what we have tested it, at least, it works quite well. So if we would take an example just to showcase a little bit about the properties within this algorithm. If we have this route here that you can see in front of you, the /user/ :id/profile. And here :id is actually a variable, so this can be whatever you like it to be. So we take the first element in this string and we start building the tree. So you get a node, which is the root node, of course. We go further and we check that, okay, we have a user. So we create a new node underneath the root. And underneath the user, we'll add another node, which is called ID. And since this is a very special, or not very, but it's a special node, because this is a variable, we mark that as orange. All right, and after that, we add the profile. So this is the result of the first route we have added. And the profile, of course, is an endpoint. So we say that this is a blue one. So let's take an example where we input a non-deterministic or that threatens the determinism in this tree. So we have /user/1/messages. And you do this again. You check for the root, of course, but then we have user. We go down or traverse the tree to the user node. And here we actually didn't find a match for the one here. So we create a new one for this. This is the special case from when we are inserting route rules into the routing tree. So as you can see here, we have one orange and one greenish node at the same level under the same node. And that is a potential conflict in path. So this is how we determine whether or not there might be a non-deterministic behavior in this. This is not very useful if you have a small amount of APIs, of course, that you can actually have a good overview of. But when you start developing a large website, for example, where you might have a few hundred URLs or endpoints that you want to have in one route file, this becomes fairly useful. Right. So another thing that we also is very proud of when it comes to the new release of Nova is how we try to solve the problem with reusability of web applications. So in projects that uses Cowboy, for example, it's not very easy to combine the both of into one project. And this was something that we wanted to solve with Nova. So basically, you can take one application that is written in Nova and include it in the application you are developing right now. Let's say that you want user management, for example, or that you want to have a chat page. Then you can just take something or a project that does exactly that and include it in your own project without any hassle with umbrella apps and so on. So one of the key points of having this is the database abstraction layer, which is called EarlDB. Me and Daniel developed this quite a few years ago, actually, and it didn't really move anywhere. So we sat down a year ago and talked about this. And we said that this is probably a very good fit for Nova and what we're trying to accomplish. So you also have the models baked into this application thinking. So we can take an example. So for example, if you're developing my web application in this case, and you want to add a forum, for example, you can just include that forum. And of course, you can just use it straight off, but you probably want to configure it a little bit. So what we have done is, when you are including an application, you can actually instruct it if you are going to have a prefix to all the routes in that application. So in our case, we could have the prefix /forum, for example, and then all the URLs coming from that certain application gets underneath the forum prefix. And of course, you probably want to define your own authentication model as well, if you have a login or OAuth behavior. And that is also reflected in the application that you include. All right, I think Daniel has.
Yes, I can continue here. I will share my screen again. What I'm going to introduce here is kind of how you install Nova, how you can do some changes, and how to use it. So one of the things that I mentioned earlier was that we wanted it to be easy to install. It should be easy to template. I mean, you shouldn't spend a lot of time before you can kind of get something running and see feedback. So with that, we have created a installation script what this will do is when you run this is it will add a reverb-free plugin that is called reverb-free Nova. And with this plugin, you kind of get templating. So you can create a new Nova application without doing a lot of things. So with the command of reverb-free new Nova my app, this will template your Nova application, and it will also create a lot of sys configurations and all the things around it. So when you run this command, you will see that you will get a lot of files. So what we try here is that from here, you should be able to just start your application. But first I will talk a bit about routing that Niclas did show. So what you can get in the first one is saying that you have a main controller index, and it is kind of the base root URL. So this is kind of the basic things that you get. And the controller that handles the business logic. In this one, we will say that when you kind of come to this index, we will say when we return a tuple with OK and a list of tuples, the list of tuples will be variables that goes back into the view, and the early detail will template them in the view. So in this case, we will have a message that says hello world. So when we go to your kind of base URL, like the local host, you will see a home page. So in the view, we use the early detail. So here is the message part that we did see in the controller. So what early detail does, and when you fetch this, is that you template it, and then it gets returned. So in this case, it will look something like this when you start your node and go to, say, localhost, and then you can see that the things are running, everything works, and the message "Hello World" is on the page. So what I'm also going to show is what we want to create a new URL and maybe change this template a bit and add 2 new users. One thing that we have start working on, there's still things to do, is we have a development mode that you can start your node with. It's called reverb-free Nova serve. So what it does is it reloads the DTL and compiles your Erlang modules. So in this, you don't need to restart the node all the time you're developing it, and you can try it kind of still running and when you do changes. So in this case, we want to add a new user URL, and that want to get some users from database. In this case, we will just hard code them in a function. So what we can see in this routing is that when we go to the /user, you will go into the module called my app main controller, and then it will go to the function get user. So we will need to add a get user function into the my app main controller. So here we can see, you can see that I have missed in the slides. So the user function here is the get user. I see that we missed to add that. So the user function here returns to user. It's two maps. Username is Alice and Bob. And as we could see in the other function, that index, is that we will template this information in the view. Because we kind of use the same controller here for two different views, we wanted to point out that for this user function, we wanted to use a different view than the one that is called my app main view. So we have changed the method part in a view, and using the Django template language to say that for each user in users, we will write out the username. So this will use the same CSS and templating that we have, and you will see that it will write out Alice and Bob. Some of the values that we use in the controller, because sometimes you don't want to do views. So the first one, when you have the OK tuple, is telling Nova that I want to use a view with these values. But in the cases that you don't use a view, you can return other kind of messages to Nova. So say that you return a status with 204, so it's no content, then Nova will just return 204 with no content. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we also have a JSON library. So if you write in a JSON and a Erlang map, it will encode it and return 200. You can also say that you want to encode your body with JSON and say that if you have done a post, you want to have the status code with 201. You maybe want to add some headers to it. And then you can add this kind of information in your controller, and it will be returned back with Nova. And also you can have a redirect path. So if things go good, you can redirect it to say the user ID if you're creating someone, and so on. So yes, Niclas, do you want to show something?
Yes, let me set up my terminal and go for a demo. Should be this one. All right. Is this viewable for you? Yes. So, all right. So basically, this is a project created by the command rebar3 new Nova and the application name, which is demo in this case. So what it creates is just a file structure for you. And as Daniel already mentioned, the routes, of course, is one of the central point here. So we can see that we have, in fact, a route here called /, which calls the demo main controller module and it calls the index function. And it only allows for the get methods. All right, so if we are to spin up this now, we can use rebar3 shell. And it spits out a lot of information. So we get the standard cowboy things. And we can see that we are running demo with Nova 081 and cowboy 290. And it listens on port 8080. Then we have some other things as well, handlers, for example. So if I open a new window or split my window here and we do a curl to this, so we use localhost and 8080, we can see that we get an actual page here with HTML elements, and it says congratulations, Nova is running. So we can also see here in the logs that we call the handler with the OK and message hello world. This means that early DTL template is actually rendered. If we exit this and we open in source controller and we open this demo main controller module, we can actually do a few things with it. So let's say that we don't want to return a HTML page. And let's say that we instead want to have a JSON object. And the JSON object here will be something hello. And if we save this and we run the same thing again, rebar3 shell, and we run the curl command. This was what I was not hoping for. This should be a JSON object returned. But of course, this is a demo, so it shouldn't work. But if we go into the controllers again, we can actually do something else. So instead of JSON, we could, for example, just say that, okay, let's return a status instead, 204, which is no constant. And this should just give us back the status code 204. So let's rerun the rebar3 shell. And we curl it. Let's curl it with -i. And here you can see that we get the HTTP 204 no content as a result of this. The JSON should work. I just need to remember a little bit on how that is.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you can have string as keys.
Right. That's good.
Yeah.
All right. So the structure in the source directory is the following. So you have controllers and you have views. And if we go into the views, they actually consist of Django template language. So if I open this up, this was the initial one that we were rendering. And it has some CSS, quite a lot of CSS in the beginning here. And at the bottom of this long CSS, you can see here that we actually print the message as a variable. So this is actually coming from Erlang and sent to the early DTL template, which then brings in whatever is in the variable message. Yes, and I think this is a very brief demo of what you can do with Nova, but the point is that it's really simple to use and hopefully to get started with. Yes, I think that was it.
Okay, well, thanks, guys. That's great. So let's see here in terms of any questions here. The one question that I had actually was, well, by your Erlang DB, what databases do you currently support? What's planned to be supported?
Currently we are only supporting ETS full out, but we have some support for MySQL as well. But what we are looking for right now is to expand with having support for Postgres. That's the next step.
Gotcha. Excellent. Excellent. Does anybody, if anybody has any questions out there as well, feel free to, turn on your video, unmute yourself, go ahead and ask away.
Is all this work available in Git? And if so, can we have that location, please?
Yes, of course. We have you can actually reach the Git repository by novaframework.org. But our group is also called Nova Framework. So if you search for that on GitHub, you should get a match for that.
Yeah, and look for the Erlang one because it's also a PHP web framework called Nova.
Yeah, don't use that one.
Thank you.
And I mean, we are kind of happy if people try it out and want to contribute to it. So if you find issues or things that we miss, I mean, we're happy if you open tickets or discussions for it.
Hi there. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Actually, I'm looking at just comparison between Node.js and Nova framework, and can you explain a little bit more why will a developer use Nova more than Node.js or Django even?
Niclas, do you have any good question? No, but I mean, why we kind of wanted to use Nova, mainly for us, I guess it's kind of, one is that we have run Erlang for a very long time. And also I think that we missed some of the functionality, for me, especially the pipelining and explicit routing that we can do now in Nova. That's helped me building applications. I'm not sure, Niclas, if you have.
I think you actually are because you were talking about Django. Now it was quite some time ago I was developing Django, but I remember back in the days they had some problems with scalability, for example, and you had to use something like Celery to actually support multi-core or having the work distributed. And I think one of the biggest strengths in Erlang is both the scalability, of course, but also the stability that you get out of it with the crash and burn model, for example. So even though we lack some of what Django has and what Phoenix has today, we're not trying to compete with them. We are trying to give something to the Erlang community and to the Beam community overall that is, not perhaps as complete as Django, but something that aims to be. Yeah, any other questions?
Hi, this is Venkat. I have one question. I played with Erlang Nitrogen. It's a framework, Nitrogen framework. So how is this different than Nitrogen?
It's much better. No, it's a little bit different. I mean, perhaps yes, you can. Since we have talked about Nova, perhaps you can highlight what you see the differences is between Nova and nitrogen.
Oh, sure. I mean, they're kind of come at from different angles. Nitrogen, of course, is more of a front-end focused, rendering the elements, rendering JavaScript, using Erlang terms as a, like the Erlang records, as opposed to falling back to HTML and the templates themselves. One of the interesting discussions that we've had a little bit, a few times this year now, is actually talking about doing some combined efforts of integrating basically the nitrogen core element stack on top of Nova, basically making nitrogen kind of like a live view layer on top of the Nova framework. So they kind of are complementary in a sense, but their focuses are different as a product. Nitrogen is very front end focused. Like 90% of the code in Nitrogen is element rendering, whereas that's not a thing that exists at all in Nova.
Yeah, I mean, when me and Niclas kind of started Nova, we kind of, as I say, started from the backend side. We have mostly built like REST APIs and WebSocket functionality, like message chat and that kind of things that maybe doesn't have that much of like HTML view rendering and as I say, present things. So as I say, we have tackled this from different angles, and yeah, but I'm still very interested in doing the kind of nitrogen view part on top of it.
Thank you. That's good explanation. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. All right, well, we have about 1 minute. So if anyone has a quick question, feel free to shoot it out. I'll give it about 10 seconds. Okay, cool. It's like a little moment of silence. All right, so thanks, Daniel and Niclas, for presenting that. That's fantastic. After this presentation, there's going to be a mixed sponsor session, and where you can kind of go through some of the sponsors, some of the products that they're affiliated with, and then of course there will also be a coffee break in Toucan. You can get to that through Hoover, I believe. So thanks to everybody for coming, and have a good enjoy the rest of your presentations.